I'm Randy Alvarez. You're watching the Wellness Hour, news that makes you healthier. I'm Randy Alvarez. Today's topic, what you could do to boost your immunity. My first guest is an expert on the topic, well respected in the medical community, especially the integrative and functional medicine community. He is the co-chair of education at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. This organization is a group of medical doctors, DOs, scientists, naturopathic physicians that get together from all over the world, thousands and thousands of them, and share their strategies for longevity, for prevention, and they cover just about all topics. So today, I invited Jim on the show, Jim LaValle on the show. He's a naturopathic physician, and we're talking about immunity, what you can do to build your immunity with Jim LaValle. Jim, welcome to the program.
Oh, it's great to be on, and you know it's also a big group of pharmacists that are there. So I'm a clinical pharmacist as well, and that's really where I hang my hat most of the time is kind of loving to spin those molecules. So,
okay, good. Now you've written more than 20 books, and are they for the lay public or are they for doctors, medical doctors?
I've done both. I mean, I've written books for the lay public, and I've written databases that hospitals use to look up things like natural compounds or drug-induced nutrient depletions. So I've written both categories.
Okay. So let's begin with, right off the bat, what people can do to boost their immunity. Maybe over-the-counter remedies, nutritional remedies, and then, of course, maybe some medications. So let's start there.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we have to realize is that in general, people don't think about their immune system, right? It's just kind of there. You know, you get a cold, you get a flu, and you go, well, hey, I got over that cold or flu. Well, then with what's happened over the last few years, all of a sudden people now are very interested in how they can start to manage their immune system. And there's some key things that people need to do. I mean, obviously, I think unless you had your head totally under a rock or in the sand, people understand the value of vitamin D, the value of zinc, the value of vitamin C now, and quercetin, as those are baseline nutrients that your body needs. And I think everybody should think about taking those. But it's really important to understand that the problems that occur with your immune system are when your body gets under a chronic inflammatory pattern. Okay. And that chronic inflammatory pattern kind of stresses your immune system, and you start making more inflammatory compounds that are circulating around in your body. And that can start to throw off your ability to fight off a bug. And in particular, and I'm getting to what people can do and why, people that are overweight, people that are pre-diabetic, people that are diabetic, people with heart disease, people with autoimmune disorders, their immune systems are already challenged 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay.
And so one of the big things that you can do is you gotta get weight under control. Without a doubt, getting people to manage their weight is important. After that, now we can start thinking about stress and getting a better night's sleep as a way to manage your immune system, because 5 hours of sleep a night equates to a 9-fold greater risk of flu.
Well,
pretty crazy, right?
Jim LaValle,
9 times greater risk.
One of the things I want to make sure that, because most of us know that we need to sleep more, we know we need to distress, we know we need to get rid of some of the inflammation. So I really want to make sure that we go over specific how-tos nutritionally and specific how-tos, like you mentioned,
sure.
Quercetin, you mentioned zinc, vitamin C, and you mentioned one other thing. I would like to know a little bit about the dosing people should look for
vitamin
in those
D.
And things like that. So anyway, go ahead and continue.
Yeah, sure. So, when you look at different nutrients, so the baseline nutrients, vitamin D, typically I would say it's safe that you take 5,000 units of vitamin D. However, when you go to your doc, get your vitamin D level checked and find out if your vitamin D level is at least at the 50% mark between the bottom number and the top number. So that would take you in around 50 to 60 as your blood level. So that's how much you need of start with D. Next, vitamin C. So for most people, 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day is plenty. When you get sick, your body uses up 8 times the amount of vitamin C. That's why they say take vitamin C when you do get a flu bug or a cold bug, because that supports that.
Can I ask you a question?
One is, of course, zinc.
A quick question about vitamin C. So there's lots of different forms of vitamin C. I have been told liposomal vitamin C is probably the best bet, most absorbed. I don't know if that's true or not. I take a liquid from Designs for Health. So can you tell me the milligrams you suggest? And my second part of the question is, once you're sick, because I know a lot of people like this, they catch a cold, they get a flu, they're worried about COVID, and then they start taking a bunch of zinc and vitamin C. Is it too late at that point? And is this something you just do for the rest of your life? Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I mean, liposomes actually aren't all that stable, so I don't think that liposomal vitamin C is the best vitamin C. Liposomes tend to not be able to make it to expiration date and stay really stable. So I'm not particularly a huge fan of liposomal vitamin C.
Oh, really?
I think that vitamin C ascorbate. Yeah. I mean, you can read up on liposomes, and they tell you that it's kind of like looking at a raindrop that goes down a window. Over time, that raindrop kind of dissipates and falls apart. It's kind of what happens with liposomes. So great marketing story, but most of the people in pharmaceutical sciences would say it's very difficult to make stable liposomes. It can happen, but I don't recommend liposomal Cs at the outset. I think vitamin C ascorbate, or you've heard of ester C, works very well. Either one of those, like I said, baseline 1,000 milligrams is fine. And yes, if you start to feel a cold or a flu bug come on, at increasing your zinc and increasing your vitamin C could help you fight the good fight because your body's using more of it. Now, that's different than maintenance. And zinc is an essential nutrient that your body needs. Vitamin C is an essential nutrient that your body needs. And vitamin D, along with a lot of other nutrients, are essential, right? So yes, you should be thinking about taking things at maintenance to keep yourself, at bay, right, to be right at balance. But then there's, what do I do to affect the immune system? So, one of my favorites, there's a couple actually, but one of them, aged garlic extract. I mean, aged garlic extract, the reason I like that is it turns off the inflammatory compounds that your body makes when it's under chronic inflammatory conditions. So in overweight people, when they took aged garlic extract, it stopped the production of cytokine called IL-6 and TNF alpha. Those are two inflammatory compounds your body makes. The higher they are, the more inflammatory your body is and the less able you are to defend against a bug, no matter what it is, whether you're talking about COVID or a flu bug or a cold bug. When you have that chronic inflammation on board, it's a problem. So the first step is aged garlic extract helps to slow down the production of inflammatory compounds. Now, the next important piece about aged garlic extract is
I'd like to cut in for a second with this garlic. You and I spoke probably, 6 months ago, 8 months ago. Time flies, maybe it was longer.
Right.
And my blood pressure was at the higher end, high end of low, I should say. My blood pressure the other day was 101 over 66, or I'm sorry, 101, and the bottom number was 66. And the only thing I changed was, because the Kyolic, you told me that brand, Kyloic, Kyolic, I took their blood pressure formula, and then I also take their cardiovascular formula. And literally, do you think that may have had something to do with it?
Well, there's multiple studies on aged garlic extract, or Kyolic, and its effect on blood pressure. So in all the studies, you average about an 11-point drop in systolic blood pressure, 6-point drop in your diastolic blood pressure. And so, yeah, I think it had a big role to play. But the interesting thing is about aged garlic extract is that it's also decreasing inflammatory signaling that damages your endothelium, the inner lining of your arteries. And the side benefit of that is when you're turning down the inflammation, your immune system is getting more balanced. And the other piece is they gave it to people during cold and flu season, and guess what happened? Incidence, severity, and duration of the bug all reduced. So it turns out that aged garlic extract, it helps your cardiovascular system, because your cardiovascular system is an inflammatory process that is driven by your immune system. To a certain extent, it's an immune system driven issue. So yes, it helped you lower your blood pressure, and yes, it's making your immune system stronger at the same time.
Okay.
Pretty
good.
neat.
What's another one?
I think that plant sterols and sterolins are incredibly good as maintenance. Now, so there's two ways to look at when you're going to supplement, right? So if you start to get a really tight chest, I might talk to you about antigraphis or English IV syrup. Right now, we're talking about what do you do for maintenance? Aged garlic, that's a good one, along with the vitamins I mentioned. And then Moducare, Moducare, is a plant sterol and sterolin. And you can think of it as an immune food because it modulates the immune system. So if you think of your immune system as being on a teeter-totter, right? And on one side of the teeter-totter, there is, I'm going to attack a bug. And on the other side of the teeter-totter is, I'm going to make an allergic response, an antibody response. You have to keep those in balance. Most nutrients help one or help the other. They're not something that balances the teeter-totter. So Moducare was first used in South Africa, and they discovered that it really helped HIV patients to reduce their viral load, in South Africa. And then they started to study it for example, they did an endurance runner study, and they showed that it dampened the cortisol response so that the runners wouldn't be as prone to getting an upper respiratory tract infection post-event. So when you think of it, a food for your immune system, this is a plant fat and what's called a plant fat glucoside. That combination in a very specific percentage, it's 100-to-1 ratio of sterols to sterolins. And I want to make sure people understand, when you hear sterols, I'm not talking about the sterol esters that are in Benecol, the butter that help you to lower your cholesterol. That's a different category of plant fats. These are sterols and sterol glucosides, multiple studies showing that they help to modulate the immune system. So they act as immune food, keeps your immune system in that teeter-totter balance. And that's why it's so valuable as a nutrient to take on a regular basis. Typical dose, 60 milligrams a day. On the aged garlic extract, the typical dose, 1,200 to 2,400 milligrams a day. And
how many pills is that, by the way?
If you don't have any heart problems, 2,400 milligrams, it depends on which formula you're using of aged garlic extract.
But
if you're looking at say, a Kyolic Reserve, it would be 4 pills.
Okay.
If it's the cardiovascular formula and the blood pressure formula, you're probably taking 3 a day of each? Yeah. 2 a day of each?
Yes, 2 a day of each.
Is that what you're doing?
I'm doing 2 a day of each.
Yeah, so you're getting 1,200 milligrams of aged garlic extract. And because your blood pressure was really pretty good, you were just looking to optimize, like to get it the best you possibly can, because I've talked to you enough to know that's how you roll. Which I think is great. I love it. But if you had blood pressure problems, say your blood pressure is 135/95, then you got to think about going to 2,400 milligrams a day. So then you would get the reserve product, and you would take 2 capsules twice a day. On the Moducare, to achieve 60 milligrams, it would be 3 capsules per day.
Okay. And this plant sterol, back to this Moducare, I'll make sure that at the end of the show, we'll list these supplements. Moducare. You buy that online? Where do you get that?
Moducare.
Moducare is the brand.
You can buy that online. You can go, a lot of health food stores have it. So it's available pretty much everywhere.
Now it's
been around for a while. It's just, it's interesting.
Go ahead.
No, nobody wanted to talk about the immune system 4 years ago. I can tell you, I've been interviewed a lot by a lot of people over the years, right? Okay. And everybody's kind of like, the immune system, how do you really explain it? And it's kind of crazy. Now everybody's interested. Moducare has been out for a while. But finally, people are, now that they're searching for immune compounds to help them, they're finding the value of Moducare. So this is not a new compound. It's just newly discovered in the public's eye because of all the interest now in immune support.
Okay, so quercetin, you mentioned quercetin. I take it. Why? And I guess it not only does it have immune system benefits, but it has some other benefits. So can you tell me about why everybody should be taking that?
Yeah, I mean, I think quercetin as a bioflavonoid, first of all, it helps your blood vessel integrity. So, when you think about getting leaky blood vessels, right? You bruise easy, or you're worried about varicosities. Quercetin can be helpful because it helps to strengthen your blood vessels. And obviously, a lot of media has been on about, hey, take quercetin because it has antiviral abilities. It helps to limit the viral spike from going into your cell and then transferring that information into your DNA. So all that's good. I think everybody's heard that. What I really like quercetin for is it helps to keep your mast cells from producing too much histamine. Because I'm finding more and more people are sensitive to foods. They're gluten intolerant, they're dairy intolerant, they're nut intolerant, they get rashy, they get histaminic, they get what's called dermographic, right? Where if you touch their skin, they get really red. And that's because their cells are starting to make more histamine than what they really need. But they're triggered in that immune defense. Remember that teeter-totter? That teeter-totter, when you're making a lot of histamines, it's this way. You're making way more allergic responses than you should. And quercetin helps to stabilize a component of your immune system called mast cells. And so mast cells won't release histamine when you're taking quercetin. So people that are asthmatic, people that have allergies, they could get some additional benefit from quercetin. And typically the dose on quercetin that I give is 300 to 500 milligrams. If they're doing something with it for somebody's health, 300 to 500 milligrams twice a day, up to 3 times a day. But if you're doing it for prevention, 300 milligrams a day is plenty.
Okay. Before we move on to this anti-inflammatory diet, this diet that'll boost any human's immune system, what else? What are other supplements? Because obviously, look, we've talked before off camera. You can't throw these great supplements at a bad diet, possibly. So what are other, obviously, we haven't even mentioned a good multivitamin. We've talked about vitamin D, things like that. But a good multivitamin with or without iron, does it depend whether you're male or female? Go ahead and let me know about that. Let us know.
Sure. I mean, I used to say it would depend if you're male or female. I'd say go to your doc, get a blood test to make sure you're not low in iron. Because one of the hallmark traits of people that are chronically inflamed is they malabsorb iron. So I'm finding more men with borderline low iron levels. If you're a woman and you're menstruating, without a doubt, you would take a multi with iron. Women that are menopausal that don't have problems with their iron levels would not need to take a multi with iron. So you got to watch the premenopause, menopause. And then the other piece to that is that, a multi is great as a foundation. A fish oil is great as a foundation. But if you're really specific, things like curcumin can have an incredible impact on chronic inflammation and keep your body resilient. If you're looking at a great antiviral, andrographis has got good human studies showing how people get over their viruses quicker and get over their post-viral syndrome, which is, after you get a bug, an upper respiratory tract infection, and your lungs just kind of feel a little tight and heavy, and they're not quite, you just don't feel like they're quite right, but you're not sick anymore. Post-viral syndromes. So, andrographis worked better than medication in a head-to-head trial, antiviral medication, on getting over post-viral syndrome. So I think andrographis is an unsung hero. A lot of people are not familiar with that. Probably one of my favorite, because everybody gets a cough and they start to develop mucus, right? That's what we're worried about going into this season. And I think English IV cough syrup, yes, the IV that grows can actually become a valuable remedy. And so English IV cough syrup is really good at breaking up mucus, reducing your cough, And I've just found it to be incredibly effective. And, for even young people, children that really don't have a lot of options for cough syrups, this is one that they can do safely.
Okay. Now, let's move over to nutrition for a moment. I've had the program now for 25 years. And I remember interviewing, this one, you probably know him, Neil Hirschenbein. He was an alternative gastroenterologist in San Diego.
I know Neil very well.
Yeah. And he one time told me, he goes, Randy, I'm just going to tell you, no matter what the disease state is, I'm just quoting him. He said, look, you got to go no gluten, if possible, no dairy, no soy, eat good fats, eat good proteins like grass-fed beef or wild-caught fish. And then of course supplement. And he said, so no matter what the disease state, that's kind of the diet. So let me run that by you. So let's talk about what diet should humans eat to ensure that they have a strong immune system, so they don't have these immune responses from things like dairy or whatever.
Right. Well, Neil was actually a student of mine, and he probably grabbed a lot of that stuff, and that's great. I'm glad he was out professing it, because he was one smart guy, a great doc. I think diet becomes very complex. Here's the easy things about diet. The first one is eat more plants. And I'm not saying become vegan. I'm just saying that we know that when you eat more plant foods, your body's going to be healthier. So vegetables are really important. Fruits, not as much. I usually tell people, 3 vegetables to every fruit. I do subscribe that people have allergies or sensitivities to food. So there's 2 ways to go about that. The first one is take the big dogs out of the run, right? So yes, gluten, dairy, soy, corn if you need to, right? Shrimp is a big one. So if you wanted to just do a blanket, hey, here are the big food allergens that people are reacting to. And then when they take them out, you can put them back in. And if they don't have a problem with it, I have people that don't have a problem with gluten. I got people that go to Italy, they eat gluten and they're fine. So I can't just give this blanket statement, but our opening diet that we use and that we teach, I teach at A4M all the time, is a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, more plant food, grass-fed organic meats, wild-caught fish, free-range chicken. And then I think you need to think about doing food allergy testing. And, one of my favorites is Infinite Food Allergy Labs, because it measures 4 categories of immune reactions. So you have IgE and IgG, which everybody measures, but then there's something called the C3BD complement, which kind of tells you how ramped up your immune system is when you eat that food. So, I agree with you on what you just said about eating, hey, here's some blanket things to get rid of. And then you've got to start to dial it in for yourself. What makes me feel good when I eat? What makes me feel bad when I eat?
Looking at your heart rate, after a food, with all the new Apple Watches and most of the smart watches, they do your heart rate. I know that I had some bad food, and I noticed my heart rate resting was like 110. Is that a response? Is that something that is valid? You tell me.
I wouldn't use it as my diagnostic criteria, meaning that, hey, I want you to, every time you eat a food, I want you to check your pulse and see if it goes up. I think there's total validity to it, because if you release a lot of histamine, your central nervous system is going to go up. You're going to make more epinephrine and norepinephrine. That's going to make your heart rate go up. So yes, I think that there is some validity to that. I like people either doing a diet elimination, which my dietitians in our facilities, that's what they do. We do diet elimination. Or if someone comes in, they have a known autoimmune disorder or a known GI disorder, we will test them for food allergies and sensitivities so we can get specific. You could be eating almonds and thinking you're doing a great job, and here you have an immune response to almonds that's causing inflammation in your tissues. And I've had that happen with plenty of patients over the years.
Okay, let's talk about vegetables. Everybody knows you're supposed to eat vegetables. I think everybody knows that, right? They just can't do it. My question to you is, there's certain good vegetables, like, for example, you may not want to have baked potatoes or starchy vegetables or root vegetables, depending on your goals of weight loss or whatever. So should you have resistant starches? Like if you're going to have rice, make sure it's white, make sure it's cold. Or if you're going to have pasta or certain carbohydrates when they're cold, they don't act the same, I guess, in the body and raise insulin levels and things like that. So what vegetables do we have to stay away from? And I know this is a big topic, but so you give us a guideline.
Well, I don't think, look, I don't think you need to stay away from any vegetables. I think the way you prepare them makes a difference. So cooked and cooled potatoes create about 20% resistant starch. So, rice is the same way. When you cook it, cool it, reheat it, you end up with a resistant starch. Or if you do it kind of in the Persian way where they cook it and draw the water off, cook it, draw the water off, lower the starch level, you get more resistant starch that way. I'm a huge fan of people understanding that resistant starch is important. You need resistant starch in order to feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut. And I think depending on what your level of activity is, I train about an hour and a half a day. So when I work out between an hour to an hour and a half a day, I need a little bit of carbohydrate. And I like a baked potato with skin or a sweet potato or a root vegetable. But at the same time, I don't eat them every day. I think people need to learn variety. And I do think it does make a difference how you cook things. So the thought of resistant starch with rice or the resistant starch with a cooked and cold baked potato totally is the way to go. Makes a lot of sense. And I think people need more green leafy vegetables. I mean, one of the biggest things I see, people have low magnesium status. I measure it. I look at their red blood cell magnesium, and invariably it's low normal, and they have muscle cramps, muscle spasms, and joint aches, and their blood pressure's up, their heart rates are a little high. And you know what? If you can get some magnesium in them, it's going to work. And the center of a chlorophyll molecule is magnesium. Just like when you eat a steak, the center of that meat, the hemoglobin, is iron. So chlorophyll is like the hemoglobin of a plant, and you need to eat green plants to get magnesium.
So with magnesium as a supplement, I'm always confused about this. So there's malate,
Right.
there's chelate, there's threonate, glycinate, and so now I'm finally thinking the threonate for calming at night might be my best bet. So can you help me understand, or what are your opinions on this?
Oh, sure. I've got an opinion on everything. So, mag-threonate is great at bedtime because it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and the threonine that they attach to the magnesium actually helps your nervous system as well as the magnesium. What's the downfall for that is in 3 capsules or 2,000 milligrams of magnesium threonate, you only get 144 milligrams of elemental magnesium. So depending on how low your mag status is or how much you exercise, you may not get enough magnesium in magnesium threonate, but I would encourage someone to take it at bedtime because that is great magnesium for bedtime use.
Okay.
I recommend it all the time. Now, mag-glycinate or bisglycinate is an amino acid chelate. And that's the one I recommend most of the time because it does the studies on it. If you go with the Albion Labs amino acid chelate, the Trax amino acid chelate, that one absorbs the best. If you want to do something for your muscle, meaning I'm sore, my muscles, I'm building up lactic acid, you think of mag malate. So magnesium malate for muscle, M for muscle. Glycinate is the best overall for absorption and utilization, in my opinion. Threonate, great for the nervous system. And mag-taurate, by the way, if you have arrhythmias, because the taurine helps the heart. So all the different magnesium salts actually have a lot of value.
Okay, now I've got to share my opinion on this, and I'm convinced I'm right on this. I've been studying nutrition my whole life as a guy that can gain 20, 30 pounds easily, so I have to watch what I eat. But I think that most people know low lean proteins, wild caught, pasture, chicken, and low glycemic vegetables are vegetables. Now, I think that the reason why people can't eat like that, because people say, Randy, even my housekeeper she goes, how do you eat like this all the time? I tried, I can't do it. And so I'm convinced that because I think when people try this type of lifestyle, they're hungry all the time because they also go low fat. So I'm a I believe, and I have about 8 tablespoons of fat of extra virgin olive oil every single day. I'll have at least 4 before noon, 4
I remember.
tablespoons, 2 at lunch, 2 at dinner, and so I'm satisfied. I'm not hungry, and I think when people, and so that's why I don't feel like I have self-control over food, but I do when I keep my fat level up and eat like that. So let me hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think fat's important. Good fats are incredibly important, and I'm a big fan of olive oil. And I remember you telling me about how you using olive oil changed your life. It's what really got you to get control of your appetite and make it happen. And I think you're absolutely right. I do think that there's another side to the story that we have to add to it, is that, for example, people that are overweight, or you're eating more high glycemic carbs and you're becoming insulin resistant, right? Your insulin receptor isn't working as well. And that happens when you have a chronic inflammatory process. When your body's in an inflammatory stance, your insulin receptors don't work as well. Well, the problem with that is you start making 2 packets of energy for your cycling of energy with the nutrients you put in the body instead of 38 packets of energy. So you lose about 19 times energy production in your cells when you're insulin resistant, or you're eating a high carb, high glycemic diet, or you've got a lot of inflammation. Now, one of the interesting things you can measure is a compound called adiponectin in your blood. Turns out that compound we talked about earlier, aged garlic extract, raises your adiponectin, helps your insulin receptors to work better. So I agree with you. Getting healthy fat in is solid. I'm not a big fan of a truly ketogenic diet for most people. There are some specialized areas where it may be a really great benefit. But I think making sure you get great fats in your diet, I think it's a great call, Randy. I couldn't agree with you more that people need great sources of fat.
Now, we haven't talked about fish oils, but you should probably, what do you think, 1,000 milligrams of DHA, get that in there. What are your thoughts on fish oils? Because I also take at least a couple of, probably 1,400 milligrams of DHA a day in my fish oil. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially if you're not a big fish eater, or you're concerned about the contaminants in fish and therefore you're avoiding fish, right? Because there's 2 camps. There's I don't like fish, and there's people that I'm scared of fish. And then, of course, there's people like me that still open up the can of sardines because I love sardines and have a good little kit of sardines. So the bottom line for me is yes, you should probably take in a couple thousand milligrams of EPA and DHA a day. So yeah, getting a quality fish oil. And why? Because there's some very specific pathways that relate, once again, to inflammation, which is going to trigger immune shifts in you and make your immune system weak, where fish oils, the omega-3 fatty acids, control that inflammatory process that's going on in the body. And so it says it influences thromboxane A2. Thromboxane A2. So you're down-regulating these thromboxane pathways that are making inflammatory prostaglandins when you're taking fish oil. So I like fish oil. I like olive oil. I want people eating plenty of vegetables. They can have a little bit of legumes too. I mean, there's a lot, you got to get that fiber in. Probably one of the biggest things that I have to counsel people on is getting fiber in their diet, because you got to eat 20 servings of vegetables a day to hit the fiber target. Nobody's getting 20 servings of vegetables a day in. So you got to get them somewhere else. Are you going to eat legumes? A lot of people don't like beans. They don't like legumes. So what are you going to do to get that fiber in? And I think that's important that people understand. That's a really strong component of diet.
Now, I got to ask you about this. Stephen Gundry, who's a thoracic surgeon who I've known from the old days when he used to be a big, heavy guy, or fat guy as he called himself, and now he's lean and mean, and he's a thoracic surgeon, and he's got all these nutrition books. But he is really into lectins, where he says stay away from lectins found in plants. So without getting into the definition of what a lectin is, but the bottom line, beans are high in lectins. Cashews, high in lectins. Almonds with the skins on them, high in lectins.
But I've had thousands of people eat beans and cashews and not be fat. Okay. So I don't agree with Dr. Gundry's lectins are everything. He's a good guy. He lost some weight. Good for him. I've stayed at my ideal weight for the last 55 years. So I don't have to worry about that I got big. I just knew how to take care of myself. So the point being is, I think that any food anyone can get reactive to. And lectins are an issue. The more your gut microbiome is disturbed and the leakier your gut is, you become more reactive to those lectins. And therefore, if you've got a really leaky gut and a really reactive immune system, then you're going to eat high lectin foods in a diet. You're going to create inflammation and you're going to gain weight. I totally agree with them there. What I don't agree with, it's the extremely big limitations on people's diets. People did not have to have these kind of restrictions or high restrictions on their diet through most of our lifetime. Obesity in the U.S. is a relatively new problem since 1960. So it's what changed? Did the beans all of a sudden get bad? I don't know.
You know, I was reading in I've always, in the old days, I should say, through high school, I always collected Guinness Book World Record books. And also they would have some people in there that were, you know, the heaviest person in the world. And I read an article that in the late 1800s, the circus fat man, the person that was the circus fat man, was weighing about 250 pounds. And so, and today that would be small. To be a circus fat man. So it was unusual back then. I got to ask you this last question. We're out of time. But I hear this all the time, and it blows my mind. And I think even somebody here in my studio, they go, but peanut butter, Randy, is good for you, like for weight loss, for things like that. And I have strong opinions. I'm kind of an anti-peanut guy. I've sat through enough lectures about peanuts where I'm afraid of peanuts. And Jack LaLanne said one time, they go, what do you think about peanuts? He said, well, if you want to look like an elephant, eat peanuts. If you want to have a physique like an elephant. So you tell me, what are your thoughts on peanuts and especially peanut butter?
Well, if you want a physique of a hippo, I guess eat plants. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to, I don't think there's any one food that is absolutely bad for everyone other than like foods that have been processed, things with trans fats, you know, things that have extra sugar added into them, eating a diet high in sugar. I think people have allergies to peanuts. That's the big problem, right? In my opinion, I don't think peanuts are inherently evil. You have to worry about the aflatoxin in peanuts. That was the big kind of concern, is that they're high in aflatoxin, which of course would, you know, be very, you know, devastating to your immune system. But once again, there's plenty of people I know that tolerate peanuts, but I'm always telling people you need to rotate your foods. Don't sit there with a tablespoon in your Jif jar and live off of peanut butter. You need to think of almond butter, pistachio nut butter, you know, other nut butters, seed butters, and vary your diet. That's where it's important. And to go back just to make sure people understand, I'm not attacking Dr. Gundry. There are people that are more sensitive to foods, and therefore when you take them off the foods that they would most likely be highly sensitive to, they're going to lose weight and they're going to feel great. And I think anybody that gets that information out there and at least starts to get people to make better choices about their food, fantastic. I'm 110% supporter of them.
Okay, how much fat should somebody have a day, in your opinion, like at a minimum? Because there's a lot of people that are still on this caloric thing.
Yeah, I mean, it really varies. I mean, they're starting to find out that people's tolerance to macronutrients. I'll give you a good example. If you're an ApoE34 or 44 genotype, you have to count your saturated fat. I mean, you really shouldn't be above 25 grams of saturated fat a day, or you're going to increase your risk of heart disease, dementia, and diabetes and cancer. And so, I mean, you know, we know that there's variations in fat, but in general, I think if people kind of settle into 30 to 40% of their diets can end up being in fats, if they're eating grass-fed, they're eating, you know, wild caught, they're taking in olive oil, which I think is a fantastic recommendation. You know, it's probably going to land in there between 30 and 40%, hopefully around 30 to 40, probably 40% on their proteins. And maybe in general, we manage people at 22 to 30% carbohydrates, depending on their level of activity.
So in the book Bredesen, The End of Alzheimer's, you talked about that APO3444 gene that makes you more likely to have Alzheimer's, right? Dementia, and the problems associated with it.
Right.
He's saying in his book that
That's right.
that a ketogenic diet might be good for these people, but also MCT coconut oil. So in moderation. What are your thoughts about MCT coconut oil?
Right.
Because Bredesen says you can have it, but it's not a long-term thing for the APO3 and 4 people.
Well, he's right that it's not a long-term thing, because I've tracked quite a few people in my lifetime doing this work, and people that have ApoE3, 4, and 4,4 that are doing 4 and 6 tablespoons of MCT oil a day, they've got inflammatory markers, their lipids are out of balance, their liver enzymes are elevated. So I think you can use it short term, and I think if you stick with that rule of keeping the fat under 25 grams, you're going to do well. I've only seen 80,000 patients in my lifetime doing this work, so I probably don't have a lot of experience. But what I've seen is that when people follow that ApoE3/4, when they follow that ApoE3/4/4/4 and get the fat down, they lose weight. Their insulin resistance goes down. They lose weight. They lose their visceral fat. Now, Bredesen that was a fantastic book, and I really support what he said. I just think you got to watch the numbers. You may be able to tolerate more MCT oil, but watch your lipids, watch your inflammatory markers that are in your bloodstream, and find out if in fact you're tolerating it. Because the one thing we know, if what you're doing is increasing inflammatory markers in your body, dyslipidemia, insulin resistance, other inflammatory markers, you're going to be moving towards all chronic diseases.
So we are out of time. Okay. How does somebody, look, you mentioned a bunch of things, and obviously people can go back to the beginning on the YouTube video, watch this from the beginning. But if they want to know about the curcumin, the garlic, the quercetin, the vitamin D, the magnesium, the Magicare, and all the things you mentioned, is there a website they can go to get a little bit more of this information?
Well, they certainly could get the studies on Kyolic and Magicare at kyolic.com.
Okay.
I know I have a lot of articles posted and information posted at my LaValle.com.
Okay.
And so there's a couple places that they can start with, that there's a lot of information for them, so they can start there.
All right. Well, Jim, always a pleasure to have you on the show, and I want to invite you back to talk about brain health and the fact that you've worked with 80,000 people. You're not just a doctor that's a great writer writing books about your theory on things and a study you saw from the outside. You're actually experimenting with patients, right? What works, what doesn't work. So good for you. I didn't know that about you. 80,000. You must be exhausted. I also know your age, and you look at least probably 15 years younger than you look. And I saw you physically because you came into my studio, and you are ripped, you're muscular, and so you obviously do all of these things that we're talking about today. Is that right?
I really believe in it. Yeah, I think you have to walk the talk. And, why not be a great example? If I've got to get up in front of the other healthcare professionals and teach them, I got to show them that, hey, I do this stuff.
Okay, good. Jim LaValle, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Randy.